Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, there's a whole lot of new stuff added into Elden Ring with the release of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, and one of the more deceptively interesting and powerful things is the Talisman of the Dread. This is a representation of Bayle, the Dread, the Great Dragon, and the effect of this talisman is that it raises the potency of Magma by around 15%. Before we dive in completely to what this actually does then, if you don't have this yourself, it is in this little shack over here on your map, the Elder's Hovel, and I'll just show the full path to get here from Castle Ensis right here in case you don't have it, but if you do already have it, you can just skip to the time on screen to get to the actual meat of the actual testing. You may be thinking, it increases magma damage, but what exactly does that mean? Well, this affects everything that you might think it does based on things visually looking like magma, but it also probably affects even more than you might expect too, and some really powerful things you probably wouldn't. So we'll dive into everything that this works with the left side of the screen showing damage without the talisman, and the right side of the screen showing damage with it in every clip that I show, and then we'll talk in a bit more depth about a couple of those that you can make really potent builds with that now involve this talisman in their best setup and are just better than they were before as already fantastic builds. The only awkward thing I'll say here to start is that the vast majority of these do require different stats from each other, so it's hard to sort of focus on more than one school of magma type damage at a time. That said, for spells, it affects every magma type sorcery. This includes Magma Shot, a more visually obvious one, and it's in the name as well, just the basic magma sorcery, Roiling Magma, which is the bouncing magma shot, slightly more advanced, but still a pretty basic spell, and again, it is literally in the name, so yes, it affects this. Gelmir's Fury, which isn't quite as obviously magma, but it counts for this spell, and this is a decent one as well. But then also Rykard's Rancor, which doesn't visually have any magma at all, it's just a skull that tracks in on the enemy and explodes every time they get anywhere close to them, but apparently because this counts as a magma type sorcery, even though it doesn't visually look like it's magma, the talisman does actually affect it. It gives you a damage boost, and this is actually the most potent generally of the magma sorceries if you want to push this talisman to one of its maximums with specifically sorcery. Past that, there are incantations that this affects as well, specifically being 3 Dragon Communion incantations. These are Magma Breath, the more basic Magma Worm incantation, as well as Theodorix's Magma, the much of a larger step up from Magma Worm incantations, a much larger Lava Breath, and then actually the brand new Bayle's Tyranny spell, which is a crazy roar attack that also does just sort of leave magma on the ground, and this does count as a magma type spell surprisingly, and this is probably the strongest of the incantations if you wanted to focus around that. Then there are also Ashes of War, and this is where it gets a little bit silly. I'll start with the weaker weapons just for the sake of building up a little bit of suspense here, but the Magma Blade curved sword that spits out lava on the floor, it does affect the damage of the lava specifically, which does of course make visual sense. The Magma Whip candlestick that again fires out lava onto the floor, this again makes sense, and it's even in the name of the weapon as it is with the Magma Blade. Then there is the unique weapon skill of the Magma Worm's Scale Sword, which was already decent enough, but this pushes it over the edge just a little bit into being a genuinely good weapon now with this involved in the setup as just a further specific damage boost that actually affects it, so that's honestly just a really fun one. But then it also affects Eruption as an Ash of War, which was genuinely capable of being pushed to ridiculous levels in the base game in the right setup, but obviously with this added in the DLC, it can be pushed even further. A more full recommended setup for this, just because it is one of the more powerful things that you can use with the Magma Talisman, would be just to have insanely heavy poise, really heavy armor. You want good endurance for this, just in general, so that you can sort of spam the attack back to back anyways, and you want the poise ways because it has some hyper upper to begin with, and it has a lot of stagger on the attack. So obviously if you can withstand your enemy's attacks long enough to keep them sitting in your growing pile of magma on the floor, the damage will really just start to pile up. This also tends to work quite well with Blood Flame as well, in my experience, as all hits of the lava on the ground also continually apply the bleed buildup, so you want a nice strong weapon to apply to then. One good choice being the new Fire Knight's greatsword, which just has a great moveset in general. Then you set it to heavy scaling or quality if you're higher than level 150, so you can afford to split your stats up a bit more. That said, you want the White Mask Helmet and Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman for the buffs when you get your bleeds. You want the Shard of Alexander to boost these skills' damage in general. Then you can now also add the Magma Talisman for an extra 15% damage, and if you really want to push it, you can use the Fire Scorpion Charm too, but generally you would probably prefer either Erdtree's Favor or the Dragon Crest Great Shield in your final slot. Then finally, there is one more thing that this affects, and it's honestly going to blow your mind if you didn't know. Blasphemous Blade. Yeah, that freaking Blasphemous Blade. The one that is one of the most overpowered weapons in the entire game, with a ranged, super high damage attack that also heals you on hit. The one that was literally nerfed just before Shadow of the Erdtree came out, and even with that was still the core of one of the most comfortable builds that you could possibly play through the whole expansion. Well, this talisman affects the unique skill on it, the one that you basically spam while using it, and boosts its damage by 15%. I mean, look at that. Is that not absolutely ridiculous? Because, you know, this weapon really needed one more thing in its favor, one more way to buff it even further. It's just been really hard done to in the past, you know? Oh, what a poor thing. That said, in order to build around this thing now, it would be quite simply the Rakshasa armor set from the DLC that boosts damage in general, as that does of course affect this, the Shard of Alexander Talisman, now the Magma Talisman for its damage boost, the Fire Scorpion Charm, and before you bring up the damage negation loss, it really is countered a lot by having reasonably high Scadutree Blessing, so if you stay on top of your levels with that, then the Scorpion Charms are honestly not that much of a deficit in the DLC area specifically. That said, the final slot is best used either for the Carrion Filigreed Crest for FP cost reduction on the skill so you can spam it a bit more, or the Erdtree's Favor +2 Talisman if you'd prefer for all the goodness that gives you. You can even also run this with a shield with the no skill default Ash so that you can still use Taker's Flame one-handed, and as far as your stats for this one, you want to focus Faith to around 60, Strength to around 40, and that just puts you at a nice solid bit of soft caps on the damage, while leaving you with enough build space to get your other stats as well where they need to be. That's pretty much it then, everyone. Just a full deep dive into the Talisman of the Dread, the surprisingly long list of things that it boosts, and a couple of already previously very strong build concepts that you can now expand and improve by working this talisman into them. I hope you've enjoyed this video then, and hey, maybe you're already using some of these things as a part of your build and are now just realizing how much stronger you could be within seconds of equipment swapping. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.